In a bustling metropolis, a struggling black deliveryman, using his humble fruit cart, heroically rushed an elderly white woman to the hospital. He sacrificed his earnings, risked his job, and faced potential eviction, believing it was the end of his world. Yet just days later, that same woman offered him an opportunity beyond anything he could have imagined. Before we unfold this incredible journey, let us know where you're tuning in from. We're eager to hear your thoughts. The city roared, a symphony of honking cars, distant sirens, and the indistinguishable hum of a million intertwined lives. The midday sun beat down, turning the humid air into a thick, suffocating blanket that clung to every surface. On the cracked sidewalks, hurried streams of people flowed like rushing phantoms, oblivious to those around them. Eleanor Vance, a woman in her 70s, navigated this urban chaos with a serene poise. Her impeccably tailored suit remained unblemished, a testament to her resolute nature. As CEO of Vance Retail Group, she had forged an empire with an iron will and a pragmatic mind. For Eleanor, life was an unending ascent, where only the robust and self-reliant were destined to thrive. Her keen gaze swept over every billboard, every rival storefront, perpetually seeking the next prime location for her supermarket chain. Today, however, beneath that composed, proud exterior, Eleanor felt an uncharacteristic weariness, an invisible pressure tightening in her chest. The city's relentless din, once the backdrop to her ambitions, now felt like a suffocating weight. The dull ache behind her eyes, which had begun hours ago, was a persistent whisper of exhaustion she tried to dismiss, attributing it to the latest quarterly reports. Suddenly, Eleanor's head spun. A sharp, searing pain shot from her temples to her heart. She stumbled, then collapsed onto the unforgiving pavement amidst the hurrying crowd. Her vision blurred as she desperately tried to call for help. "Please, someone, call an ambulance." Her voice, a faint plea, was swallowed by the city's clamor. In that terrifying moment, an overwhelming dread consumed Eleanor. The fear of dying unnoticed, the fear of utter helplessness when all power and wealth became meaningless. The control she had always prided herself on vanished, leaving her utterly exposed, a stark contrast to the perfectly ordered world she inhabited. The surrounding crowd reacted with a mix of shock and morbid fascination. A few quickly drew their phones not to dial for assistance, but to record the unfolding spectacle. Others merely stood by, their eyes both inquisitive and tinged with apprehension, as if her collapse were a contagion. They huddled together, forming a small, silent ring around her. Eleanor desperately reached out to the unfamiliar faces, silently pleading, but they averted their gazes as if she were an invisible obstacle, a problem they wished to avoid, let alone engage with. The fear in her heart solidified into a cold bitterness. She was utterly alone. David Lee, a 40-year-old black man with a gaunt, weary frame, was pushing his dilapidated fruit cart around that very street corner. His face was hollow, his eyes sunken from hunger and exhaustion. He had lost his day labor job at a construction site the previous week, and now his sole income stemmed from hawking fruits and snacks from his unwieldy, creaking cart. The cart, laden with apples, oranges, and pre-packaged sandwiches, represented his last sliver of hope. Tucked snugly against his back in a worn fabric sling was his young daughter, Lily, 5 years old. Lily clutched her tattered doll, her large, dark eyes wide, mournful and watchful. Lily suffered from a mild but chronic form of anemia, a condition not immediately life-threatening, but one that demanded regular hospital visits for blood tests, monitoring, and continuous iron supplements. This was a relentless financial drain on David, eroding every meager dollar he earned. Every cough, every pallor in her face, sent a pang through his heart. He witnessed Eleanor's fall. His gaze didn't linger on curiosity or fear. Instead, it was a profound recognition, the complete vulnerability of a person in distress and the cold indifference of the world around them. He instinctively reached for his old phone, intending to call an ambulance. Suddenly, a small, insidious voice echoed in his head, the voice of anxiety, of lurking fear. "Don't get into trouble, David. You have Lily. You owe rent. Every dollar counts. Stopping to help someone could cost you everything. You've already lost your job. Do you have nothing left to lose?" But then he looked at Eleanor, crumpled and gasping, and then at the indifferent crowd. A split-second decision, instinctive and gut-wrenching, flashed in his mind. There was no time to wait. A life hung in the balance. The voice of fear was silenced by a stronger will, the will to do what was right whatever the cost. Without another moment's hesitation, David immediately let go of his cart, ignoring its wobble and collapse, ignoring Lily's startled cry. In his haste, David's only phone slipped from his pocket, hitting the hard pavement with a dry clack. The screen shattered, rendering it useless. He bent down, looking at the broken phone, a fleeting sorrow in his eyes. This was his sole means of communication, his fragile link to job opportunities, his lifeline to the outside world. But then he swallowed the bitterness, cast it aside, prioritizing the fading life before him. Lily's small hand gripped his shirt, her tiny face pressed against his back, and that simple touch was all the strength he needed. David knelt beside Eleanor, his voice urgent but firm. "Lily, hold on tight to Daddy." David quickly checked Eleanor's pulse, performing basic CPR he had learned from a brief first aid course years ago. He turned to the crowd, shouting, "Someone please call an ambulance. Hurry." But everyone hesitated, avoiding his gaze, timidly shaking their heads. A wave of bitter disappointment surged through David. He understood that in this vast, impersonal city, sometimes life and death were separated by a single moment of apathy. Unable to rely on the indifferent crowd, David, with Lily still clinging to his back, quickly loaded Eleanor onto his fruit cart, transforming it into a makeshift stretcher. He strained, pushing the heavy cart towards the distant hospital entrance. Every step was a struggle. His body trembled from hunger, exhaustion, and the immense weight. Fruits and food scattered from the toppling cart as he yelled to clear a path through the throng. Drenched in sweat, his muscles screaming in protest, he was driven by Lily's pale face and Eleanor's desperate gasps. Lily clung to him, fearful but trusting in her father's strength. Upon reaching the hospital, David was on the verge of collapse. Nurses and doctors swiftly brought Eleanor inside. He provided what little information he had, then waited with Lily in the cold plastic chairs. He watched the emergency room door, consumed by worry, needing to know Eleanor was safe. He sought no thanks or compensation. He simply wanted his act of kindness to have mattered. Finally assured Eleanor was stable, he hugged Lily, his face etched with sadness. As they left, David made a shocking discovery. His cart, his only means of livelihood, was gone. A hollow void opened in his stomach. He silently took Lily's hand and disappeared into the city's anonymous flow. Moments later, a harsh voice halted him. "Hey, stop." The vendor, a corpulent man with a perpetual scowl, stomped towards him. "What are you doing? Where's the cart? My merchandise? Are you trying to cheat me?" He growled, accusing David of ruining his rented cart and bruising his produce. "The cart is $500. The goods are another $800. That's a total of $1,300. You could sell your own child and still not have enough to pay." David was stunned. $1,300 was an astronomical sum for a jobless man with meager savings and a sick child. $1,300. "I don't have it. I just lost my job. Lily is sick," he stammered, his voice trembling with desperation. The vendor scoffed, spat, and threatened. "If you don't have it, go beg. I'm giving you exactly 1 day. Tomorrow, if there's no money, don't blame me. I'll send people to visit your shabby boarding house." He then walked away, leaving David isolated and shattered. David's world collapsed into a bottomless abyss. He looked at Lily, his eyes stinging with tears. 10 days of unemployment had drained him. Now he faced monumental debt. His selfless act had cost him his future, his ability to provide for Lily. The fear of failing to care for her chronic anemia, an echo of his own mother's death from illness due to lack of funds, drilled into him. The $1,300 burden choked all hope. He stumbled forward, trying to be strong for Lily, but his shoulders shook uncontrollably. Hot tears mixed with sweat on his gaunt cheeks. He felt as if he was dragging a colossal boulder far heavier than his lost cart and Lily combined. "What do I do, Lily? What do I do?" The question echoed unanswered, leaving only despair and extreme fear for his daughter's future. The hospital lights were cold and dazzling. Eleanor slowly opened her eyes, her pupils shrinking from the harsh glare. Her head throbbed, her throat parched, and the strong antiseptic smell stung her nostrils. As she moved her fingers, feeling the rough sheets, a chilling truth emerged. She was in the hospital. The memory of her fall returned, bringing with it the terrifying fear of lying helpless on the sidewalk, surrounded by indifferent, avoiding faces. That loneliness was more haunting than any physical pain. She, Eleanor Vance, the powerful woman always surrounded by devoted assistants and fawning partners, had been utterly alone in her moment of near death. No flowers, no cards, no familiar faces filled the stark white room. Only the steady ticking of machines and a terrifying silence. Not even her son Charles was there. A chilling emptiness ached in her chest, the void that decades of relentless work and success had so cleverly concealed. A young nurse entered, her face tired, but her eyes filled with genuine concern. She helped Eleanor drink water, checking her vital signs. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Vance?" the nurse asked, her voice gentle. "The doctor said you suffered severe exhaustion and a sudden spike in blood pressure. Fortunately, someone brought you in just in time." Eleanor nodded weakly. "Who brought me here?" "A man and his small daughter, ma'am. He didn't even stay for a thank you. Just made sure you were safe and left." That truth about a complete stranger who had helped her without seeking rewards struck Eleanor deeply. It was a bitter contrast to the indifference of those around her at the time, and a simmering shame rose within her. The following days in the hospital passed slowly. Eleanor often looked out the window watching the hurried traffic below. The city was still noisy, busy, but now she saw it with different eyes. Every car horn, every passing figure was no longer an echo of career and ambition, but fragments of millions of anonymous lives, where kindness and indifference intertwined. She recalled her own weak hand reaching out and the faces that turned away. She remembered the thin back of the stranger who had bent down without a moment's hesitation. A question kept repeating in her mind. Why did he help when no one else did? Why did a person with nothing give everything while those with everything turned a blind eye? That question wasn't just about David, but also about herself, about the value of the successes she had pursued for so long. Throughout her life, Eleanor Vance had always believed in self-reliance, in each person fighting for their own place. She had built an empire based on that ideal, becoming a symbol of strength and independence. She believed that kindness was weakness, that unconditional help was naive, even pointless. But now, lying alone in her hospital room, she realized that belief had become an invisible cage trapping her own soul. The indifference of the crowd, coupled with David's noble act, tore through the proud veil she had built up over the years. She felt a strong urge, a longing to know about the man who had saved her life, to understand what had driven him. Eleanor's decision came as unexpectedly as a changing wind. After being discharged from the hospital, instead of returning to her office and resuming her usual busy routine, she asked her close assistant, Sarah, to find information about the man who had saved her. Sarah, a smart and dedicated young woman, was initially quite confused. "Mrs. Vance, are you sure? This will take a lot of time and resources. Besides, we have so many meetings and files to process," Sarah said cautiously. Eleanor interrupted Sarah with a light, decisive wave of her hand. Her eyes were firm without a hint of hesitation, a new fire igniting in her familiar sharp gaze. "Miss Sarah, I want to find that man at any cost," Eleanor said. "This is not a request but an order. Find him. Find out everything about him. I want to know his name, where he lives, what he does." Sarah looked at Mrs. Eleanor with surprise. This was an unusual request, very different from her usual business commands, but she dared not disobey. "Yes, ma'am. I'll start right away," Sarah replied. Eleanor said nothing more. She turned to the window, her eyes distant, where the last rays of the setting sun were painting the skyscrapers red. A new journey, unrelated to profits or market share, had just begun in the soul of this once iron-willed woman. She didn't know who David was, but she felt an invisible thread connecting her to him, a thread of gratitude and a strong, deep curiosity as to why he chose kindness in such a utilitarian world. Even as David struggled desperately, Sarah diligently searched for the man who saved Eleanor. Initial hospital records were unhelpful, so she deployed private investigators and security personnel, focusing on the area where Eleanor had fallen. The search was difficult. Security camera footage was blurry, and though a thin man pushing a cart with a child was identified, finding his exact identity and contact information proved futile. David Lee seemed like a ghost in the city, leaving no official trace. Sarah reported these difficulties to Eleanor, noting David's unstable records and lack of phone contact. Eleanor reviewed a blurry photo of David, her eyes thoughtful. She knew finding someone so elusive in a large city was incredibly hard, but she refused to give up. Later, while reviewing an internal report on urgent entry-level recruitment, she impulsively scrolled through the candidate list. A name jumped out: David Lee. Eleanor froze, her hand trembling as she touched the tablet. It was an incredible coincidence. She immediately called Sarah into her office to confirm the name. When Sarah confirmed it was David Lee, Eleanor handed her the tablet showing the name on the candidate list. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. No way. Such a coincidence. Miss Sarah, Eleanor declared, her eyes filled with newfound determination. Cancel all external searches. The man we needed to find has found us. This isn't coincidence. It's destiny. A sign I'm on the right path. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She personally summoned David to her office. When he walked in his old clothes, his face hollowed by hunger and anxiety, Eleanor witnessed his despair and fear firsthand. Seeing him, a good man driven to the brink by societal indifference and lack of opportunity, brought a profound shock to Eleanor. Her wall of wealth and power crumbled, revealing a deep empathy. A powerful urge rose within her to change things, not just for David but for others like him. "Hello, David Lee," Eleanor said, her voice no longer distant. "Please have a seat." David, apprehensive, sat on the expensive chair wondering if this was a trap. His only thought was how to convince her to give him a chance to repay his debt and provide for Lily. Eleanor went straight to the point. "David, I know you're looking for a job and I know your circumstances, but I didn't call you here just to repay a debt or offer you a janitorial job." David stared, startled and confused. "When you saved me, you showed courage, decisiveness and a special instinct," Eleanor continued, her voice deliberate and firm. "Your profile shows resilience, sharp real-life observation skills, clever communication from your time at the market and rare ethics. These are qualities my top market research specialists with all their degrees lack. It's valuable street smarts." David was speechless, bewildered. Street smarts? Talent? He saw himself as just an unemployed, dirty, hungry man. Eleanor stood looking out at the bustling city. "The Vance Group is expanding and we need eyes, ears and hearts that truly understand the community. We need someone who can go deep into each area, observe people's habits, preferences and culture naturally. You can provide the live data that my dry reports miss." He turned back, her gaze firm. "David Lee, I'm offering you a position as a field market development specialist or potential customer research supervisor in our store expansion department. The salary will be enough for you and your daughter to live comfortably, full benefits, a decent apartment and most importantly, I guarantee Lily the best medical care and education until she's an adult." David was in complete shock. Such an important position, a high salary and apartment treatment for Lily, it was beyond his wildest dreams. He was deeply skeptical. Was this a trick? Charity in disguise? He felt unworthy. "I'm just useless, a failed man," a voice whispered inside him. "Ma'am? You're not doing charity, are you?" David stammered, his voice trembling with suspicion. Eleanor shook her head, a slight smile on her lips. "No, David. I'm not doing charity. I'm a businesswoman. I'm investing in a valuable talent my corporation lacks. You are an asset, David. I need you." She placed a stack of prepared contracts on the table. "Read these terms carefully. This is not charity but a real opportunity, a partnership." David picked up the contracts, his fingers trembling. He looked at Eleanor, his eyes filled with complex emotions. Despair had almost consumed him hours earlier. Now a completely new door was opening. He thought of Lily, her coughs, her tired eyes. This wasn't just an opportunity for him but Lily's future, her life. Eleanor had seen something in him he didn't know existed. For Lily he couldn't miss this chance. David took a deep breath and nodded. "I accept, Mrs. Vance. I won't disappoint you." Eleanor nodded back, a satisfied smile on her lips. This was more than a business contract. It was the start of a profound change not just for David but for Eleanor herself and the entire Vance Group. Eleanor's decision to hire David for a senior specialist position and provide generous support immediately caused a wave of fierce opposition within the corporation. Mr. Thomas, the longtime chief operating officer, A conservative man who valued traditional qualifications and experience, led the opposition. In a tense board meeting, Mr. Thomas stood up, his voice filled with criticism. "Mrs. Eleanor, I must frankly say that this decision is entirely emotional and unprofessional. We are talking about a strategic position requiring high qualifications, not a charity job. Hiring someone without a degree, without industry experience, and then spending company money to repay a personal favor like this is unacceptable." Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. Eleanor maintained a calm demeanor, but she felt the pressure. She knew they were implying she was using company money for personal repayment, and this could lead to a vote of no confidence. "I am not doing charity, Mr. Thomas," Eleanor replied, her voice cold but firm. "I am investing in a talent that this corporation lacks. David Lee possesses qualities that degrees cannot teach. Time will tell." The meeting ended in a tense atmosphere. Eleanor knew she was taking a huge gamble on David, and Mr. Thomas and his faction would not leave her in peace. David began his new job at Vance Group. He moved into a decent, clean, and fully furnished apartment in a new residential area. Lily started preschool nearby and began regular checkups at the hospital. Their lives seemed to have turned a completely new page. However, the luxurious and unfamiliar office environment was not easy. David felt suspicious glances and whispers behind his back. Some colleagues looked down on him, seeing him as the boss's favorite or Eleanor's charity case. He overheard snippets like, "What kind of market specialist? Probably just a delivery boy," or, "Money and power indeed. You can put anyone anywhere you want." David faced initial difficulties adapting. He had to learn many new things, from complex workflows to using basic office software he had never touched. Once he struggled with the photocopier or confused folders on the computer, and was met with a contemptuous look from a younger colleague. David's inner self was torn between gratitude to Eleanor and his own insecurity, the pressure to prove himself. He felt like a fish out of water. "Am I doing this wrong? Do I really belong here?" He wondered, the fear of disappointing Eleanor weighing heavily. He remembered Eleanor's words about his street smarts. That was the only strength he had. David silently resolved to work twice as hard, learn continuously, and prove that Eleanor's faith in him was entirely justified. Every night after Lily was asleep, he would pull out the business and market books Eleanor had given him, trying to digest every word. He didn't want to let her down, and above all, he wanted to create a better future for Lily. A major crisis struck the corporation. A new store expansion project in the southern part of the city, a densely populated but culturally complex area, was facing serious problems. Traditional market research, based on data and sample surveys, had shown this to be a golden location with immense profit potential. However, after 3 months of operation, the new store's sales were unusually low. There were even rumors of the store being secretly boycotted by the local community for reasons no one on the board understood. In an emergency meeting, Mr. Thomas said triumphantly, "I told you dry figures never lie. We made a serious mistake. This project is costing millions of dollars and damaging the corporation's reputation." The top experts of the corporation were at a loss. They couldn't find the cause, and all proposed solutions were ineffective. Pressure on Eleanor and the corporation grew, threatening significant financial and reputational damage. Eleanor sat silently looking at the frustrated faces of her colleagues. She felt a deep disappointment. They had data. They had degrees. But they lacked something intangible. Suddenly, Eleanor looked up, her gaze resting on David, who was sitting at the back of the meeting room, quietly observing. A thought flashed in her mind. What had she put her trust in him for? Not just because he saved her, but because of what he saw, what he felt from real life. "David," Eleanor spoke, her voice echoing in the meeting room. "Go to that area. Use your street smarts to find out what the problem is. You have 72 hours. The entire room fell silent. Mr. Thomas and the others looked at Eleanor with astonishment, even ridicule. A person without a degree being entrusted with saving a multi-million-dollar project? It was ridiculous. David felt hundreds of eyes on him, but he didn't back down. He nodded, his face showing clear determination. David didn't use questionnaires or dry charts. He dressed in simple clothes, blending into the community. He spent hours wandering through small alleys, stopping at roadside tea stalls, listening to the gossip of housewives, the complaints of small vendors, or the laughter of children. He observed their daily routines and shopping habits as naturally as possible. He ate local food, drank iced tea on the sidewalk, and talked to people like a normal resident. David felt like he was returning to a familiar environment where he could read things that numbers couldn't express. He discovered many surprises. Golden hours. The store opened late in the morning when locals had already gone to the market early for fresh produce, and closed too early in the evening when they usually went for walks and bought groceries after dinner. Unsuitable products. The store sold too many expensive imported products, while residents in this area had lower incomes and needed essential everyday goods, especially popular local spices and foods that were missing. Cultural/spiritual factors. David overheard many whispers about the store being built on land considered inauspicious according to local feng shui, or that the store's facade design had a detail that the community felt disrespectful to local culture. This created a secret boycott that no one dared to openly state. 72 hours later, David returned to Eleanor's office. He didn't bring detailed reports or complex charts. He only had a stack of handwritten notes and the stories he had heard. "Mrs. Eleanor," David began, his voice calm and confident. "The problem isn't with numbers but with people." He presented his findings in a visual, sharp manner, as if telling a story. He specifically described the daily routines of the local residents, how they went to the market early in the morning and shopped in the evening, what items they truly needed, and the familiar spices the store lacked. He also subtly mentioned the cultural and spiritual concerns that people were whispering about. "I propose," David said, "we need to adjust opening hours to match their habits, change the product catalog, add more essential goods and local specialties, and most importantly, we need to find ways to directly approach and engage with local community groups and influencers to build trust and resolve misunderstandings. Perhaps organize a small ceremony according to local customs to reassure them, or sponsor a local community activity." Eleanor listened to David, her eyes gleaming. She knew she was right. David's analysis wasn't based on mechanical data, but on a deep understanding of people and culture. Mr. Thomas, who was also present, initially scoffed, but gradually his expression turned to astonishment. David's arguments were too logical and convincing, hitting the weaknesses they had overlooked. David's proposals were immediately implemented by Eleanor. The store adjusted its opening hours, changed its product structure, and began community engagement activities. Within just a few weeks, the store's sales soared impressively, saving the project from the brink of bankruptcy. This success astonished the entire board and undeniably proved the value of street smarts and David's unique abilities. Eleanor was proven right. Mr. Thomas, though still annoyed, could say nothing more. David felt a quiet pride. He had proven his worth not just to Eleanor but to himself. Lily, now healthier, often came to pick him up at the company gate, clutching his hand and saying, "Daddy is my superhero." David smiled, feeling that all the hardships and humiliations he had endured were worth it. David's resounding success in the market expansion project solidified Eleanor's position and silenced all dissent. David not only maintained his position but was also promoted, becoming key personnel, a special advisor to Eleanor in market expansion and community relations projects. He was a living testament to the corporation's new policy, a symbol of change. In Eleanor's luxurious office late one afternoon, golden sunlight poured in, softening the room's usual solemnity. Eleanor looked at David, now confident and composed in his neat business suit. She smiled. "You proved me right, David," Eleanor said, her voice filled with satisfaction. "They believed that qualifications were everything, but you showed them that a deep understanding of people, perseverance, and ethics are what truly create value." David nodded. "But it's all thanks to you, Mrs. Eleanor. You gave me an opportunity no one else would." Eleanor sighed softly, her gaze distant. "No, David, you gave me more than that. You helped me look at myself, at what I had pursued. I once believed that money and power were the pinnacle of life. But the moment I lay on the sidewalk, alone and helpless, I realized I had lost the truly important values." She turned to look at David, her eyes filled with empathy. "You saved my life without seeking anything in return. You taught me about kindness that demands no reward. You, David, changed me. I realized that success doesn't just come from degrees or assets, but also from human values, empathy, and compassion." Under Eleanor's new leadership, the Vance Group was not just a business empire, but also a symbol of compassion and social change. Eleanor established the Vance Community Support Fund and programs for life skills and vocational training for the disadvantaged, inspired by David's story and his experiences. She also changed the corporation's recruitment policy, focusing more on candidates' hidden potential and ethics rather than just their qualifications. A grand opening ceremony for the new Community Support Center was held. This was one of the fund's first projects. David, in a sharp suit, stood confidently on the podium, presenting the center's role for people in difficult circumstances. He was no longer the emaciated, hesitant man of before. His voice resonated, full of confidence and persuasion. Lily, now a healthy, pretty and vibrant little girl, sat in the front row with Sarah. She had fully recovered, was attending school and had a stable, happy life. Eleanor stood at the back, quietly observing David. The relationship between her and David had transcended that of benefactor and beneficiary or boss and employee. It was one of deep respect, mutual trust and an unnameable family bond. Eleanor found a new meaning in life, not just financial success, but dedication and sharing. The ceremony ended. Eleanor and David stood together on the rooftop of the Vance Group building, looking out at the city spread out below them. "You know, David," Eleanor said, her voice soft. "That day when I fell, I thought I would die alone with no one caring. But you appeared. You didn't just save my life. You saved my soul. You gave me a second chance to live a more meaningful life." David smiled. "And you gave me a new life, Mrs. Eleanor. You gave Lily a future." Lily ran over, taking David's hand. She looked up at Eleanor, a radiant smile on her face. Eleanor bent down, affectionately stroking Lily's head. 3 individuals from 3 different worlds were connected by a single act of kindness. The city was still noisy, bustling, but now for Eleanor and David, it was no longer a cold and indifferent place. It was a place where kindness could still flourish, where seemingly unrelated lives could intertwine, creating a story of change, compassion, and hope. The late afternoon sun shone down, forming a brilliant halo around them. David and Lily stood side by side, a new family, a new future, while Eleanor watched them with a satisfied and loving smile. Join us in sharing meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.